onto my, I'm recording on my computer right now because I've heard that that's even better quality than recording to the cloud. All right. So welcome, Jasmine Bellamy.
Thank you for having me.
So glad to have you. So for those of you who haven't heard me talk about her yet, I met Jazzy while doing free yoga on the beach with hundreds of other Black people last summer. We were both there, but I didn't say hello to her until months later. But anyway, we were both there on that beach with Christopher Yogi Rev Sims leading an awesome class on warrior poses. So Jasmine is a mom. She's a divinity student and a corporate executive who hosts a podcast called The Call to Love Experience podcast. I got to spend a few days with her at Yogi Rev's retreat in the fall. And what I can say to you is that she really is one of those people who practices love. Like, she feels like she doesn't have an armor, or like she's not trying to people please. She's not trying to protect old wounds. I mean, she really is available to just be herself and to be loving. And I thought that was great and amazing for someone who works in a Fortune 500 company to have that kind of presence about her. And Jazzy, I know you can tell us more about exactly, you don't have to tell us your title unless you want to, but how you work with changing corporate culture. So that is how I know Jasmine, and I'm so excited to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction. It was perfect. And I really feel like you captured who I am, where I am on the journey right now, and to really to hear it from your lips, it comes straight to my heart. And so thank you for that. I really appreciate that introduction.
It's sometimes it's really good to know how people see you, or that you're being seen, below the surface level, you're being seen.
Yeah.
So we like to start this call off with each interviewee just telling us what's good. So what's good about life? What's good about the world? What's good about how you're feeling about your body? Any way you want to interpret that question. What's good right now?
Man, I when people ask me how I'm doing, I say I am wonderful. And it is because I'm literally full of wonder and awe. And so when I think about what's good, I endeavor to live a life full of love. And that looks different every day. It looks different every hour. But I know that is what I'm doing. And so that's what's good. Like, to really live a life of love is what's good. I would say particularly right now, I'm a mom of two. My daughter just got home from college, which was wonderful. So there's, my son is in boarding school, so I consider myself an empty nester. And so there's something very beautiful about welcoming them home. And so I got one home so far. So I'm excited about just spending time with them and being very present with them during this season. So it's all is well with me. I cannot complain at all.
I'm gonna follow up with the all is well with you.
Yes.
Because I was it was last summer. So I talked about us meeting on the beach in Inkwell Beach in Martha's Vineyard. Well, last summer, I was on a porch singing a little song called All Is Well with a couple of other women, and that song came to me in response to all the worrying, that I was kind of doing, but also looking at the world. If you listen to the news while you're in the car, so how do you maintain that perspective that all is well, given everything we know that's happening in the world?
Yeah. I would have to say that it's been a very big shift for me, to really think about life from the space where I can impact it. Like what how can I transform the culture that I'm in? And because I am very focused on that, I am not consumed by all the things that I can't control.
Mhm.
You know, I was actually traveling on business last week to my alma mater and was able to sit in conversation with some PhDs, trying to solve all the world problems. And one of them really just honestly sharing his anxiety around where the world is. And so I acknowledge that that exists. But what I offered to him was this ability to think about what are the things we can impact, what is within our control to do, because there is a lot to do. But if we lose sight of what we can do, because everything else feels so big, that's where the world loses out on our gift.
Mm.
So I might, even with my kids, every now and again, when they'll talk about something that feels super big in front of them, and I'll share, the little adage, that people share, how do you eat an elephant one bite at a time?
Mhm.
That what we can do is what's within our control, our span of control to do. And I think sometimes why we feel overwhelmed is because there's so much out of our control. But I would say also that I just also try to live a surrendered life, that I'm really focused on just being who I am, and in being who I am, I know that I'm bringing gifts with me. And so if I can commit to that, then I'm doing good things. Again, it keeps me from being stressed. I used to have my mind used to race on all the things that I would think all the time, and all the things I was trying to process and all the things I was trying to solve. And I really had to really focus on working on my mind.
Mm.
And so a lot of that had to do with how I used my agency,
Mhm.
and not losing sight of that, in the midst of a world.
Mm.
It doesn't mean that things become less complex, but if I can focus on what I can contribute more so than what I can't, it for me it's just been much more helpful for me.
Mm. Courtney. Mm. So, there's so much richness in what you just said, Jasmine. One of the things, of course, I have to follow up on is a surrendered life. I mean, just the phrase kind of makes me feel a little more relaxed.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but like, is there something you do on a daily basis to surrender your life? How do you do that?
Yeah, well, I will say that a part of my practice, every morning I wake up, and give myself a really a full hour, sometimes more, depends on what's needed. And I'm just still. There's no, sometimes it might be music added. So I might grab my phone just for music, or I might grab my phone for a guided meditation. But most times I'm just sitting still. And it's allowing me to transition well from sleeping. And for me, I receive a lot in those moments. And so it's become really important for me to take that time really slowly, so that as things are coming to me, I can gather myself kind of around them. And it really gives me a point of direction for the day in a lot of ways. So a lot of times I'll get downloads like in the middle of the night, and so I'm literally grabbing my phone and I'm writing it all down just so I don't forget, and that I can almost record it, so to speak. But in the mornings, like I've even had to change my whole workout routine and all of that, because I need to be still in the morning. So I usually try to wake up at least a full 2 hours before I have to do anything, so that I give myself sufficient amount of time to be still on a daily basis. So that's one. But I think, if I talked about how I frame life, at this point in my journey, there was a point in my journey where I was a type A. I was about controlling everything. I was about where I was going, the strategy, the big picture, all the things. And I am at a different place now. And one of the things I say often is, we know in part. So I really know I know in part. And so I am much more about paying attention to life and how life is pointing me in the direction that I should be going in, and trusting that I'm moving in the direction that I ought to, and that everything is exactly the way it should be. That's just how I'm moving through life. And so instead of me saying, I have to do this, I want to do this, I'm going to accomplish this and all these things, I am much more focused on paying attention to how life is guiding me. And so, my faith and my spirituality that's the anchor of my life. And so that's really how I can surrender to the fact that I trust me. I trust the being that I am. I trust the journey that I'm on. I trust the purpose that is in me. And I really look to follow it out. And so I pay attention to the little stirrings in my heart, and I lean into those things. I pay attention to the things that may not feel so great. I'm just constantly paying attention and moving accordingly. So that's really a lot of what helps me live a surrendered life. But the big thing is, there's no plan that I'm trying to execute anymore. I really relinquished a lot of that. So for me, it's just a matter of, I know that I am here. I know that my purpose is love. I know that that is my calling. I know that that's my spiritual gift. And I continue just to live out life, and allowing it to flourish in all of the ways that it's going to. But there's I don't have a crystal ball that I know where it is, right? So it's literally paying attention to life and sitting in the unfolding for me.
Yeah, that is really cool, really alternative, to the goal-centered approach. And it does require then, at least that hour each day to be paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
I was feeling, I went through some feelings this morning, and from something that happened yesterday. And I felt a little regretful that, oh, why didn't I work with this yesterday? Now here it is 24 hours later, and now I'm really dealing with it.
Mm-hmm.
But I hear what you're saying about when you have that time to be still and to notice, pay attention,
Mm-hmm.
then you can see, okay, what needs to be dealt with today?
Mm-hmm.
And you said, where's life pointing me?
Mm-hmm.
Is there an example of that where you feel like life pointed you somewhere?
Yeah. I mean, I can even just talk about the last 24 hours. I think for me, synchronicity is such a big part of my life these days. And I would say for the past couple of years, I was listening to a song on Saturday in a group session that I'm in, and the song talks about, I'm sending you light to hold you. I'm sending you light to heal you. I'm sending you light to hold you in love. I say holding you in love all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so I hear that song.
Mm-hmm.
I had never heard it before.
Mm-hmm.
But in that, it connected light and love
in healing, I was like, that song could be my theme song, And so just being able to pay attention to that and to know that there was something there for me, that I could be even more present in that moment, how I heard that song. But, then I'm in a conversation today, completely not connected to that. And the person I'm talking to brings up that idea of being held in love. Right? So I'm always paying attention to the little dots that seemingly aren't connected, but I know that they are connected. One of I think part of the journey is too, I know myself well. And so part of knowing myself well, Clifton Strength Finders will tell you that of my top 5, I have strategic and connectedness, which is a rare combination, but allows me to see the big picture and the connected dots at the same time. So my life is playing out like that on a daily basis, where these seemingly random little dots are connecting and sharing a big picture. Or, but that conversation I had today was connected to a morning when I don't even remember how I kind of came across an app and really started to enjoy it, and thought that I thought that this could be a good part of my own practices. And then I got a little nudge a week later to reach out to the co-founder of that app. And then that led to just a shot, right? Reaching out. They responded. Today was the conversation. Now we're talking about how to work together, right? It's those little, really quiet nudges that you get that are me. It's me being divinely guided, that I'm paying attention to. And not only am I paying attention to it, I'm acting on it. So if I get the nudge to reach out to somebody, I'm reaching out to them. I may not know why, I may not know where it's gonna go, but I literally can feel it in my body. So I just say that that happens to me all the time, where something I'm thinking about or talking to someone about, somehow it'll show up and manifest in a completely separate thing, and it'll be my way of knowing that that's the path to move down, or the thing to pay attention to, or to lean in a little bit further, and see where that goes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that you said also that stood out for me was, you said, I trust myself.
Yeah.
And that's usually a journey.
And it has been a journey.
I mean, how many women of a certain age, it's such a beautiful place to arrive at, but so tell us, would you mind just sharing us, maybe a before and after, sometime you didn't trust yourself, but now how you do? Or
Yeah, I would say I was raised very much in a performative culture. So it was all about the things that, whether it's I got great grades, or, I always did all the right things. And that worked for me for a really long time. Just having the goals, accomplishing that, like that's, at a corporate career, like all of these things, right, are the things that we kind of get set up in the beginning that we think is going to create success for us in life. And then I hit a point in my life where those things weren't necessarily bringing me joy. Like I had all the things, I had what it was supposed to look like. But
like what things did you have?
So for me, I had been married for many years. I lived in the suburbs. I had, a lovely home. My kids were in private school. I had all those things. But if I didn't feel fully loved and nurtured, then what was the point? There was something still missing. And so I would say I've been on this journey for the last 5 years of really transforming. Like the transformation is the biggest word or the most consistent word that I would say has been part of the journey, but it's been the unlearning and the relearning. It's been the relinquishing of things. It's been the taking the space. For me, it started with a yoga practice, then it extended into a meditation practice. Then it started with creating a rule of life. That retreat is a practice for me as well. Silence and solitude is about it, but a lot of it was I had to take time to get to know myself. It includes therapy, it includes spiritual direction, it has all of it. But in a lot of ways for me, I got to a place where I literally remember after leaving my marriage after at that point 20 years, and being like, moving into my new place and hearing there is love greater than you've ever understood. And that was the first, I argue it's the first step. Obviously it was more before, but that was the one that I remember most definitively. And I just started to pay attention to hearing that in me.
Say that again, because I think that message is important.
Yeah, just there was love greater than I had ever yet to understand, and really being able to pay attention to that and follow that. And that was the beginning of me really starting a love practice. It was me becoming more vulnerable, paying attention to what was going on in my mind and in my heart. And I would say over time, I call myself a self-love advocate and a self-love activist, because really understanding what that means to be tender to myself, to see myself in all of its beauty, to be most compassionate to myself, to be loving to myself, to not judge the things that might be arising in my heart or in my head, but rather embrace them with curiosity, and then and trusting that there is healing happening even when I don't necessarily understand it. So all of that stuff started happening, but I think it really came to life for me when I started to lean into love more and understanding what that might look like to live a life of love. And so for me, there was a period where I just started writing. I started a writing practice and I wrote every day. And it was me finding what love is, like all the things that I found, whether it was from a scripture, whether it was from a philosopher, whether it was from a contemporary thinker, and really flushing through all of this information that was coming toward me and paying more attention to what it was teaching me about love, and then really filtering that into my life and starting to actually put it into practice. Because I think the biggest piece often is when we think about love that either in a romantic way, we think about with our familiar, our family and those closest to us, but we don't think about love as a life force. And so for me, I was just on this journey. And like I said, writing every day. I had about a 2-hour writing practice almost for a year and I did that every single day. And from there, over time, it was almost as if I was teaching myself.
Yeah.
With a word, like literally the world full of information, like the amount of information in the world about love is insane. But we don't approach it as a study. And there was somewhere in that process, in that journey, that I remember saying the challenging thing about love that is different from a yoga practice or different from a meditation practice is that when I'm in those practices, I'm on a mat by myself or on a cushion by myself. And the only thing I have to deal with is my own mind that chooses it wants to do something else. It's just me. But in love, you are operating with others, and you are operating with others that you do not control. And so understanding how to practice, like, it's often said with meditation, like the life is the actual meditation practice. It's not what we do on our cushion. It's actually how we can maintain that posture while we're living. It's the same thing with love. But again, it's more of a dance because you're doing it with other people.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really required me to rethink and reshape how I saw myself, how I saw others. And as I continued to do that consistently, it started to change my actual lived experience. It gave me more peace. I found less stress and anxiety. I found much more freedom. And I would just often also say just much more joy.
And
So all of these things were just as I was becoming a student of love and actually taking all the things that I knew to be true in my being to heart and actually living it and committing to living it out, it started to change literally my world around me. It changed the circle of people who are around me. It changed my vocation. I never intended to be in seminary. That was not a plan of mine, but as I lived a life of love, it kept pointing me further along the path and the journey. And I feel
wow.
like we're all over the place with that, but yeah,
Well, let me pop in because I want to.
yeah.
I know our time is coming to a close, and I really want to ask you a couple things about changing culture.
Yeah.
So because I know that that's part of what you do in your corporate life.
Yeah.
So I wonder what you would say to folks who have, especially, I think there is a tendency for more women to be in sort of DEI or corporate culture kind of spaces, wanting to shift them.
Mhm.
What's, if you were going to say one, I don't know, I don't know if I want to say one lesson, or is there a story where you shifted you and that shifted people around you, or yeah, how about we
Yeah,
start there?
that's a perfect. So one, I will say that we started the conversation right because it started with me in love.
Mm-hmm.
And if it didn't start with me in love, then when I run the business and my company, but I was asked to take on this role to transform our culture to a culture that was anti-racist. And so for me, the moment in which I was asked that question was also as I was starting my seminary journey. And so though it's like I came to work all of a sudden as my full self, everything about me came to bear in solving that complex problem. And so as I created this platform called Courageous Conversations, and the goal of it was to walk alongside a DEI typical educational training. This was to be more of an embodied communal practice where we sat together as a company and we wrestled with things and we were transformed by the narrative of other people. So I did not show up in that space with the intention of changing people. What I brought to the table was an invitation to be in a communal, courageous conversation. And it's those stories, that engagement, the openness, the exchange that created the bridge that then transformed culture. It wasn't me, it was me being a vessel to bring that into a space and to hold that space for people. But what I learned is that people were changing not because of the fact that I created that platform, it was because of what was happening in that container. And so that to me is the powerful thing, is that if we can commit to transforming our context just by showing up and bringing our gifts to it, we don't get to determine how the change and transformation actually happens.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's almost like you bring your candle, you bring your light into a space, and then you start lighting the candles of others. And then all of a sudden the space becomes more light and less dark.
Mm-hmm.
you know? And so I think that was what has blown my mind about it, is how it has stirred the hearts of other people.
Mm-hmm.
I've had as many as 550 people holding space in these courageous conversations. And
Mm-hmm.
so the things that people are sharing are reverberating literally off of people's hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that's what's actually opening up the door for transformation.
You know,
And
that
so
is
that's what's
exactly,
been my journey.
and that's something that you said at the very early on in this conversation. On my notes, I have here heart-centered life. What is a
Mhm,
love-centered life versus a problem-centered life? You know,
mhm,
or let's say a courageous conversation that is heart-centered or love-centered versus problem-centered. You know,
mhm,
what I just wonder, what would you like, let me just give you an example
mhm,
of a, so let's say a problem at a company is, it could be something institutional, like, you know, our customers are X% of the company's revenue, but our leadership team is all white, for example,
mhm,
you know, some kind of
mhm,
disparity
mhm,
in that kind of way.
mhm.
Um, how would you bring a heart-centered or love-centered conversation as opposed to a problem-centered
Yeah,
conversation? Or
yeah.
would you approach it differently?
Yeah, I would just say in general, it's one, it starts with a conversation. And so if we haven't created the opportunity to, like, well, let me say it this way. Oftentimes there's these things that are happening in our minds that we're not saying out loud, but somehow we expect them to be solved.
Mm,
So that's why I kind of started with the fact that there actually has to be a conversation. I would, I, I often encourage people to bring curiosity to these conversations, as opposed to thinking that you have the answer.
mm,
And because what I believe what happens, or what my experience has been, is if both of us can come to the conversation, have a conversation, share the things that are on our hearts, the concerns, how we're seeing it, then there's an opportunity there for answers to arise.
mm,
But if we come to the conversation thinking that we have the answer, and all we're really trying to do is convince somebody to do what we think they should do,
mhm,
and that's manipulative. So, but what I will also say though, in general, when I bring love into these conversations, not judgment,
mm,
not when I can bring the truth of my story, and actually also bring courageous listening to hear the truth of somebody else's story, and we can start to exchange, and I can share what my concern might be about the disparity between our leadership versus our customers. I can share that as a concern.
mhm,
um, I think we create an opportunity to have an honest engagement about those challenges. I will tell you, one of the biggest things that I emphasize in our culture is dismantling fear. And so when we can dismantle fear, and by bringing love into the context, then we can start to figure out how to actually have problem solving toward real things,
mm,
you
mm,
know.
mm,
But it's all of that. Like, a lot of times there's so much silence and so much fear that is actually creating barriers. But the more we can bring love into those situations, the more we can bring curiosity, the more we can bring the honesty of our hearts, of the things that are concerning us, and then allow them to meet,
mhm,
then we can figure out together how to solve things.
mhm, mm,
And that's been like I think sometimes people are trying to convince you to for a party line, or to, be brainwashed or gaslit. And so that's where, if we can just be honest about where we are with things, if we can bring the truth to the table, then we can figure out what the answer is together.
mm. You know, I did have this, you said that voice said to you at that moment that you don't have, you don't know the sense of what love really is, you know? Uh, so I had a little voice say to me at one point when I was going to talk to my husband about something. It said, say something to him like, let's look at this together.
Mhm,
You know, that is
mhm,
sort of, that is a, that is a very different, it's almost like me saying, I trust you. I'm
Mhm,
extending you some trust here.
mhm.
So much more could be said on this. As we know, this is an ongoing thing about, but I just appreciate the other thing you said about dismantling fear.
Mm.
Like a prerequisite is being able to come to the table and dismantle fear. So, and that's probably in us as well as, you know, other people, those other
Yeah.
people.
Yeah, I mean, I will just say I'm fearless at this point in my life, right? Because
Oh, okay.
there's nothing, I'm not afraid. And so I'm gonna say the tough things. I'm just not afraid. And so because I'm not afraid, it allows me, that doesn't mean that that doesn't mean that I'm coming, strong and knocking people. No, I'm just not afraid of that if I say something, that something's gonna happen to me. Like, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm just here showing up being me. I'm gonna be kind, I'm gonna be gracious. That doesn't mean I won't be challenging. I'm gonna share what's on my heart. I'm gonna share if something's not connecting. I'm gonna bring all my questions to the table, but I'm not afraid to ask the questions. I'm not afraid to vulnerably share what might be stirring in my heart. That's
I-
I think people silence themselves so many times because they're just afraid of something, and
Yes.
I'm just not.
Okay, well, let me just say this out loud because here's some of the things that we know we're afraid of. Maybe not you, Jazzy, but I know people, I am, and many people, we're afraid of what we're attached to. We're afraid of losing our money. So we're afraid of losing jobs
Mhm,
or clients if we're in business for ourselves,
mhm,
or I've had to deal with being afraid of losing support or somehow feeling like, if I don't say the thing that is in the dominant narrative about racial justice,
mhm,
then I will be canceled,
mhm.
So what do you, so like,
I've relinquished all of those things already. I've lost all of
oh,
those things before,
yes, but you,
right?
but you have this job, so you're not afraid of losing your job, for example. No.
Mm-mm, mm-mm. Because again, if I really trust that I'm divinely guided, I'm gonna be where I'm supposed to be.
Mm, So
I just
that's the foundation.
Yeah,
Got you.
yeah. There's
Wow.
nothing I'm trying to hold on. There's nothing I'm trying to create on my own. There's nothing I am trying to manufacture. None of it. But that,
Okay.
but again, I had to relinquish so many things before to get to a place like this.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
So I've already lost the jobs that I feared. I've changed the friend groups and lost the friend groups, the things that I feared. I've had all the things that we generally are fearful of at different points in time,
Yeah.
that in the rebuilding of myself,
Yes.
those fears are already gone because I've had the growth on the other side of the tension.
Okay. And this is where we had to start to have this juicy conversation about when do you start talking about things that you're in the process of versus when you've come through on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
I wonder, what you would say about, and I don't want to be too general because then it really doesn't help people when you're just so abstract.
Mhm.
But for example, if you are in a conflict in, your marriage or your job or with your child, um, and you have this, and you're a teacher, it
Mhm.
can be very tempting, as you know,
Mhm.
to teach about that, to be writing about that in real time,
Mhm.
you know? And one of the things that you said to me about an author who we were both discussing was, I
Mhm.
think she started talking about this too soon.
Yeah. Yeah. So I would say, I'm reading things that I wrote 3 years ago
Hmm.
that are so life-giving to me now. And I know that when I wrote them 3 years ago, that I was divinely inspired to write them. But at the same time, they were they it wasn't necessarily from my own wounding or anything. It was just about what love is. So as I was researching what love is, I could I had a lived experience that made me connect to that thing, but I wasn't speaking out of my own hurt.
Mhm, mhm.
I was actually stretching myself to grow to what love is as I was living. And
Mhm.
so when I go back and I read those things now, 3 years later, I'm just so touched because I can't believe that that's where I know where I was when I wrote them. You know what I mean? And then I know where I am now. And so I just say that I think there's things you can offer, but we have to be very mindful of what's in process for us.
Yes.
We have to honor ourselves in that sense to
Yes.
understand what's in process for us. And we have to know what our stages of grief are and where we are in that stage. And we have to be honest with ourselves. And if we're not at that place, we're probably not ready to share yet.
Mhm. 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 Yes. Yes. And there's so much, I'm just gonna wrap us up after this. It's so easy to overshare before you even realize you've done it. You know what I mean? Just because of the social media 24/7
Yeah.
situation. So that time with yourself, and that relinquishing, surrendering to the timing that you're on, rather than the external goal. This is just, thank you so much. You really have shared so
Thank
much with us
you.
today.
Thank you. I appreciate the invitation. It's good to be
How
here
can
with
people
you.
get more of you?
So I would say usually one of the easiest ways is either love101ministries.com or Love 101 Ministries on Instagram or Facebook.
Hmm.
You mentioned the podcast earlier, the Call to Love Experience. You can find that on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or Anchor. But I would think that those are some of the easiest places to find me.
Okay, so you said Love 101 Ministries.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Love 101 Ministries, and
Yeah.
then the Call to Love Experience
Podcast. Yep.
podcast. Okay, so you've heard it all here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.